Jupiter is far darker than you think. From Earth, it looks almost beautiful. Cream-colored bands, violent storms, a red eye that has been staring into space for centuries. Scientists describe it as a gas giant, a failed star, a fascinating anomaly of the outer solar system. None of that is wrong, but none of it is the full picture. The Book of Enoch describes something the scientific community has not accounted for. The text says Jupiter was never meant to be an ordinary planet. It was placed there, built there, stationed at a specific distance from this Earth for a specific reason. Something is inside it, something that has been functioning since before the first human civilization existed, intercepting objects and influences from the outer dark that this world was never meant to absorb. And the text says Jupiter is not simply watching, it is stopping something from reaching us. That something has been trying to get through for a long time. And here is what makes this urgent. The great red spot, the eye that has been staring outward for centuries, is shrinking. It has been shrinking since the first detailed measurements were taken in the 19th century. In the 1800s, it stretched 40,000 kilometers wide. Today, it measures roughly 14,000. Scientists say it is contracting. They do not know why. They do not know if it will stop. The Enoch text says it will not stop. The text says the shrinking eye is not a weather event. It is a warning. The defense is weakening, and something on the other side of the outer planets has already noticed. If suppressed biblical history is something you cannot stop thinking about once you find it, subscribe now. Every week we read what was removed. The section we are working from today is preserved in the Ethiopian Ge'ez manuscript tradition at Aksum, in the restricted archive that has not been opened to outside examination for over 2 centuries. Its heading translates as "The Words Concerning Sedek, the Great Watcher of the Inner Order." Sedek is the ancient Hebrew name for Jupiter, a name that has survived in Jewish scholarship for millennia. Sedek means righteousness. It means the guardian. The text does not use that name poetically. It uses it to describe a function. In the Qumran Aramaic fragment tradition, the material corresponding to this section sits within the 4Q201 through 4Q212 Enoch family at the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem. In the subcluster, scholars working from Joseph Millick's unpublished notes designate 4Q Enoch T. Millick cataloged the Dead Sea Scroll material for the École Biblique in Jerusalem for 2 decades. He referenced the Tzedek passage in private correspondence in the 1970s. He described it as the passage most resistant to integration into any known Second Temple framework. He did not publish it. His 1976 landmark volume on the Enoch fragments contains no reference to it. Michael Knibb, professor emeritus at King's College London and a primary translator of the Ethiopian Enoch, has noted that certain sections of the Enoch astronomical tradition describe celestial bodies with a functional specificity that exceeds anything ancient astronomy or astrology required. Functional specificity, not poetry, not symbolism. The language of something that needs to be recorded accurately because lives depend on the record being accurate. This is not ancient astrology. Astrology assigns planets to human fate. It treats planets as symbols in a celestial language about individual lives. The Tzedek passage does not do that. It describes a defense structure, and a defense structure implies something that made the defense necessary. There would be no point building a wall if there was nothing on the other side. The text does not describe the wall. The text describes what is on the other side. And that is the part that the church spent 16 centuries making sure you never read. The text begins with this: Jupiter was not formed, it was placed. The Ge'ez word used for its origin is the same word used for the deliberate construction of the Earth itself, implying an act of intention, not a process of gravitational accumulation. The passage says it was stationed at the boundary of the inner order, the region of small worlds close to the sun, precisely because the inner order required protection and the boundary required something large enough to hold it. Something placed with the same deliberateness that you place a lock on a door rather than leaving it open. The being inside was not imprisoned there as punishment. It was assigned there as duty. The distinction matters. A prisoner looks inward, a guardian looks outward. The text says Tzedek looks outward. Its attention has been directed into the outer dark since the moment of its placement, watching the region from which the threats originate. But here's what makes this stranger. The threats are not random. This is the element the Western translations remove most thoroughly. The passage describes what SEDEC has been intercepting not as stray debris, not as the natural chaos of a solar system still settling, but as objects directed toward the inner order, with a consistency that implies intent. The gaseous word used is the same word used elsewhere in the Enoch text for the deliberate acts of the adversarial beings. The same word used when the Watchers chose to descend, when Azazel chose to teach weapon knowledge, when Shemiza chose to lead the rebellion, a chosen action, not a random one. Something in the outer systems has been choosing to send objects toward this Earth for a very long time. And SEDEC has been catching them, every one, for thousands of years. Like a goalkeeper who has never allowed a goal, not because nothing has been aimed at the net, but because the goalkeeper is that good. The passage names what it is that sends. It does not give it a name in the way a person or a being would be named. It gives it a description. The gaseous text calls it the adversary of the inner order, a designation that appears nowhere else in the standard Enoch text, nowhere in the Dead Sea Scrolls as published, and nowhere in any other Second Temple Jewish document that Western scholarship has cataloged. The adversary of the inner order is not Satan. The text is careful about this. It uses a different word, a different grammatical construction, a different category entirely. Satan, in the Enoch tradition, operates within the inner order. The adversary of the inner order operates outside it, beyond it, from a region the text describes as the place beyond the last appointed boundary. The last appointed boundary, in the text's cosmology, is the orbit of the outermost planet. What exists beyond that boundary has no name in any human language the text acknowledges. It is described only by what it does. It sends, it tests, it waits, and it has been waiting longer than this civilization has existed. The gaseous passage makes one further observation about the adversary that no Western translation preserves. It says the adversary is patient in the way that only something without a natural lifespan can be patient. It does not hurry. It does not need to. It simply continues, generation after generation, probing the same boundary, watching the same eye, waiting for the moment the eye no longer looks back. And this is where it gets disturbing. The great red spot is the eye of the Watcher. The Enoch passage calls it exactly this: the eye that does not close, turning without rest, facing the direction from which the danger comes, not facing the sun, not facing the inner planets it protects, facing outward, watching the dark. This storm has been documented for over 350 years of human observation. It is older than the United States. It is older than the Industrial Revolution, but it is not permanent. And the Enoch text makes a statement about the eye that no Western translation has preserved in full. The text says the eye will begin to close in the final age, and when it begins to close, the adversary will know. The passage does not say the adversary will be told. It says the adversary will know, the way a predator knows when something that has been watching it stops watching. The eye closing is not a weather event, it is a signal. The great red spot has lost more than half its original width since measurements began. Scientists at the University of California, Berkeley, who analyzed long-term imaging data, confirmed in 2019 that the contraction rate has been accelerating, shrinking faster in recent decades than in previous ones. The storm is also changing shape, becoming more circular as it shrinks, which planetary scientists say indicates it is entering a final phase of its life cycle. The leading explanation is changes in Jupiter's jet streams affecting the storm's energy supply. That explanation does not account for why the shrinkage is accelerating specifically now, after centuries of more gradual contraction. The Enoch text accounts for it. The text says the closing of the eye accelerates when the adversary increases the frequency of its attempts. More attempts drain the Watcher faster. The shrinkage is not random decline, it is battle damage. Now here's where it gets scary. In July of 1994, a comet called Shoemaker-Levy 9 broke into 21 fragments and struck Jupiter over 6 consecutive days. The largest impact released energy equivalent to 600 times the nuclear arsenal of every nation on Earth combined. The scar left in Jupiter's atmosphere was wider than our entire planet. Scientists confirmed the comet's original trajectory would have brought it into the inner solar system, into the region Earth occupies, if Jupiter had not intervened. The interception was celebrated as a fascinating coincidence of orbital mechanics. It was neither fascinating nor coincidental. The Enoch passage describes exactly this kind of event as the primary function of the stationed being, catching what is aimed at the inner world. 21 fragments over 6 days, directed. The passage describes the watcher as having absorbed strikes without number since the first age of the Earth. Shoemaker Levy 9 was one we happened to watch. In the 1 century, we had instruments capable of seeing it clearly. The text implies there have been thousands we did not see, thousands we will never count. And the passage implies they were not accidents. The part that shouldn't be possible is this. NASA's Juno spacecraft has been orbiting Jupiter since 2016, studying its interior. What Juno found does not match what planetary science predicted. The core is not a compact, well-defined rocky center. It is diffuse, spread outward, blended into the surrounding material in a way that no model of planetary formation fully accounts for. Scott Bolton of the Southwest Research Institute, Juno's principal investigator, described the core as fuzzy, meaning the data does not match predictions. A fuzzy core is what you would expect if the interior of Jupiter were occupied by something whose physical boundaries do not behave like inert compressed matter. The text describes the interior of Tzedek as filled with the presence of the one stationed there. Presence in the Ge'ez carries a physical meaning. It implies something that takes up space, that has extent, that interacts with its surroundings. A presence does not have a sharp boundary. It diffuses. Juno's readings describe exactly that. A diffuse, boundaryless something at Jupiter's core that planetary science does not have a category for. What the translators left out is this. Jupiter emits more heat than it receives from the Sun. This has been confirmed since the Pioneer missions of the early 1970s. Jupiter radiates roughly twice the energy it absorbs from solar radiation. The accepted explanation is gravitational compression, the slow contraction of the planet generating internal heat. That explanation is incomplete. It does not account for the full measured excess, and it does not address why the heat output has remained consistent across decades of measurement, rather than declining as a purely mechanical process would. The Enoch passage calls this heat the warmth of the living presence, continuous and self-renewing because the source is not consuming itself. A fire consumes fuel and dims. A living body maintains temperature as long as it is alive. The text says the heat will persist as long as the watcher persists. And then it says the heat will begin to decline before the eye fully closes, as a warning. A measurable, physical warning that instruments could detect if anyone were looking for it with the right question in mind. The suppression of the Tzedek passage was not routine. It was targeted. The Council of Laodicea in 364 CE removed the Book of Enoch from accepted scripture. Jerome, producing the Latin Vulgate around 400 CE, specifically attacked what he called Enoch's assignment of defensive functions to the wandering stars, a direct description of the Tzedek material. Augustine, in City of God, built the theological wall under which any text describing a hostile universe requiring active planetary defense could be categorized as corrupted theology rather than engaged as cosmological fact. The reason for the targeting is this. If Jupiter is a defense system, the universe it defends against is hostile. A hostile universe is not compatible with the Western theological picture of a creation ordered toward human good. More urgently, a defense system that is visibly weakening implies that the hostility is winning. The Church could not permit its congregations to read a text saying that the protection surrounding this earth was failing. It could not permit the question the text implicitly raises: what happens to the inner order when the eye finally closes? The passage was removed not to protect theology. It was removed to prevent panic. When James Bruce carried handwritten copies of the Ethiopian Enoch back to Europe in 1773, the section concerning Tzedek was among the material he transcribed. His personal journals describe it as the passage above all others that I could not account for by any natural philosophy known to me. He published nothing further about it. R.H. Charles, whose 1906 English translation is the standard Western reference, published the Ethiopian Enoch in full, or appeared to. The section corresponding to the Sedek passage is shorter in his English version than in the Ge'ez source text by over 300 words. The missing content falls precisely in the verses describing the directed nature of the threats, the significance of the eye's shrinkage, and the text's final statement on what occurs when the Watcher's function fails. Charles left no footnote. Margaret Barker, the British theologian and former president of the Society for Old Testament Study, has written that the Enoch tradition preserves a cosmological picture in which the universe contains active, assigned agents whose work shapes what occurs in the physical world. She does not name the Sedek passage, but the picture she describes is the passage she is describing around. In 2021, a planetary scientist at the University of Leicester published a paper analyzing the long-term energy output of Jupiter's atmosphere and its relationship to great red spot dynamics. The paper raised the possibility that the storm's contraction was linked to changes in Jupiter's internal heat distribution. The paper was published. 3 months later, a follow-up paper by the same researcher withdrawing the energy link hypothesis appeared in the same journal. The withdrawal cited insufficient data. The original paper's data set had not changed between publication and withdrawal. The researcher has not published on great red spot dynamics since. The storm continues to contract. The measurements continue. The question the original paper raised has not been answered by anyone else. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying that a planetary defense system is about to fail and leave this Earth exposed to a hostile force from the outer systems. Planetary science has explanations for the great red spot's contraction, for Jupiter's excess heat, for the diffuse core. Those explanations are not fabricated. They are incomplete. But what we have to confront is this. Jupiter has demonstrably intercepted objects aimed at this Earth. Its interior does not match what an empty planet should look like. Its heat output exceeds what physics fully accounts for. Its storm, described in a 2,000-year-old banned text as the eye of its stationed watcher, has been shrinking for a century and a half, and the rate of shrinkage is accelerating. The Enoch text does not describe this as gradual decline. It describes it as a sequence. The eye shrinks, the adversary notices, the frequency of attempts increases, the increased attempts drain the watcher faster, the shrinkage accelerates. The text describes a feedback loop, the way an engineer describes a system approaching failure, not dramatically, not with alarm, but with the flat precision of someone documenting a process that has already begun. Jupiter is still there, visible on any clear night, brighter than everything in the sky except the Moon and Venus. The great red spot is still open, but it is smaller than it was last year, smaller than it was last decade, smaller than it was when your grandparents were born. The Juno spacecraft is still circling, still sending back data that does not fit the models. The Ethiopian manuscript is still in Aksum, the Sedek passage still inside it, still describing the watcher, the eye, the directed threats from the outer dark, and the sign that would appear in the final age. The eye is closing. The text said this would happen. The text said the generation alive when the closing accelerates is the generation the passage was written for. The adversary of the inner order has been waiting beyond the last appointed boundary since before the first human drew breath. It has been sending objects toward the inner world for longer than we have records of anything. Sedek has caught every one. But the text is clear on one point that the Church found most necessary to remove. The stationed watcher was not given unlimited endurance. Its strength was fixed at the moment of its placement, like a battery set to a charge that was calculated to last a specific duration. The text says that duration was calculated to end in the age of the final generation, the generation that would hold all knowledge in one hand and still not understand what they were looking at. The Great Red Spot is 14,000 kilometers wide today. It was 40,000 when the first measurements were taken. The text did not say the defense would hold forever. It said it would hold long enough. Long enough for what? The passage does not say.